saying how you actually manage to film 45 minutes in a day. How do you approach that?
I think so. For us, the way that we made it work with filming 45 minutes in a day is essentially in the planning of it. So we already know we go to recce it knowing sort of what the story is, what we like about these people, and then once the designer and the builder come back, we know what we're planning to do work-wise and what their sort of idea is. And then we essentially realise quite quickly what you actually need is quite a lot of scenes to fill up the time. So you actually need about 30 scenes to make it a goer. So we would film, and for each PD, they had a week in the office and a week on location. So they would do 2 shows. So on their off week, they would go and shoot their backstory. So they go and film with their families, go and interview them, talk about what's all the background to what's happened, how they feel. And that is part of the first bit of the show that sort of sets up who they are and makes you care about them. And then pretty much everything else is filmed the second week in a sort of day and a bit. And part of the way that we made it work is having 2 presenters. So we also had a kind of DV director who would go off with one of the presenters and go and shoot some extra scenes. So they would go and do this thing called Next Best Round. So they'd go and meet something which related to the story. They'd go and meet somebody who would sort of find out more about it, which also takes you away from the house, which is one of the things we realised we needed. Especially when we started filming, it was the winter, it was quite grey, we were in quite grotty houses, it's all a bit dark and depressing. We also developed things like design challenges and that we could do. So we need the aim is to teach them and the viewers how to make some things. We'd also teach them how to do a bit of DIY. We've really worked hard with the builders, just doing little tips of useful stuff that you can kind of take home. So, I mean, how to take a skirting board off, or how to take a carpet up, how to tile, how to grout, just quite stuff that you might actually want to learn, but it's sort of making sure it's really understandable and really clear. And those are all sort of bits and pieces, little bits that you can pick up on location that help to kind of make it feel like you're learning something from the show. And the other thing we've worked quite hard on is just to make sure there's a narrative going through it, and that's probably in the planning. Because I think we realised very quickly on the old series, because we were building for 2 weeks, the build story would often come over time. Stuff would happen, things would go wrong, and you could develop it over the time, and we'd have someone on location the whole time shooting all of that stuff, so you could build the story as it went. Whereas with this, because you've only got a day and a half, you've got to kind of plan out what's going to happen in the build story, like you know what the problem might be or what the major issue is and how we solve it. And a lot of it has to be planned ahead, because otherwise you could end up with nothing really. It doesn't work with a documentary style filming. It needs to be quite, when it's formatted, you need to kind of work out what your story's going to be and how it's going to work. And then obviously there's always the opportunity for stuff to happen and to try something new. And especially with a series like this, there's always something that doesn't turn up, so that's always quite a big part of it. But it needs to be quite carefully planned and thought through, essentially.
It's a serious jigsaw, isn't it? There's this many minutes to get out of a very tight week.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's do one.